A peaceful day at the park takes a shocking turn when an unthinkable act leaves everyone stunned. Families were enjoying the sunny afternoon, kids laughing and playing, when a little black girl was suddenly struck by a man whom no one expected would cross such a line. The crowd froze, unsure of what to do, but the girl's father wasn't far behind, and he wasn't just any dad. As people whispered and tried to make sense of what had just happened, the man was about to learn a life-changing lesson he'd never forget. Little did he know, his father wasn't just protective, he was the chief of police. How would this confrontation end? What would justice look like in the face of such blatant disrespect? Stick around to find out how one act of courage turned the tables in an unforgettable way. As people gathered around, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some were stunned silent, while others reached for their phones to record what had just happened. The little girl clutched her arm, her tear-streaked face filled with confusion and pain. Her dad arrived moments later, calm but with a presence that demanded attention. He knelt beside his daughter, checking to make sure she was okay. The man who had caused the chaos stood frozen, his expression shifting between defiance and fear as he realized this wasn't going to blow over. Witnesses began to share what they'd seen, recounting how the man's actions seemed completely unprovoked. The father, still in his uniform from earlier that day, straightened up and turned to face the man. His badge now visible, the atmosphere grew tense. The man's face paled as he stammered, realizing he had messed with the wrong family. What would happen next? The crowd grew larger, and the tension thickened as the father locked eyes with the man. The air felt heavy, and even the usual hum of the park seemed to fade. People whispered among themselves, some furious and others simply in disbelief. One woman who had been sitting nearby stepped forward, saying she saw everything. It came out of nowhere, she said, her voice trembling. She was just playing on the swings. He walked up, said something I couldn't hear, and then he hit her. The father didn't say much, but his silence carried weight. He stayed calm, his focus shifting between his daughter and the man. The man tried to explain, his words stumbling out in a mix of excuses and denial. "It's not what it looks like," he muttered, but no one seemed convinced. Every second felt like an eternity as people waited to see how this would end. What could possibly justify such an act? The father, his presence steady and commanding, took a step closer, and the man's confidence wavered. The moment felt like the calm before a storm, but no one could predict what was about to happen. The man's attempts to explain himself only made the situation worse. His voice was shaky now, his confidence slipping as the father remained silent, watching him closely. The little girl, still holding her arm, stood by her father's side, her tearful eyes a reminder of what had just happened. The crowd's murmurs turned into hushed discussions as everyone speculated about what might happen next. Some quietly cheered for the father to take action, while others exchanged concerned glances, unsure of how far things might go. The father finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "What made you think you could do that to my daughter?" The question hung in the air, cutting through the noise. The man stammered again, unable to form a clear answer. His guilt was written all over his face, but he still tried to deny it. Then, more witnesses stepped forward, their voices growing louder. Each person described what they had seen, their stories aligning. The father's expression didn't change, but his stance became more commanding. As the tension reached its peak, the man began to shift nervously, realizing there was no escaping what was coming. The father reached for his radio, calling for backup, and the crowd held their breath. Everyone could feel it. The moment of reckoning was near. Just as the father finished calling for backup, a voice from the crowd spoke up, loud enough to catch everyone's attention. "I know him." A middle-aged man stepped forward, his face tight with anger. He pointed at the man who had struck the girl. "He's done this before. Different park, same story. Always targeting kids who can't fight back." The crowd gasped, the tension shifting into something darker, fear mixed with outrage. The accused man's face turned pale, his eyes darting around as though searching for a way out. "You don't know what you're talking about." he shouted defensively, but his voice cracked under the weight of the accusation. More murmurs rippled through the crowd as the new witness explained how similar incidents had gone unreported because victims were too scared to speak up. The father's jaw tightened, and his focus sharpened. This wasn't just about his daughter anymore. It was about stopping someone who had been getting away with this for far too long. The crowd closed in slightly, their disbelief turning to anger. But the father raised a hand to calm them. "Let the law handle it," he said firmly, though his eyes burned with resolve. The man's knees seemed to buckle under the weight of what was coming, but no one could have predicted what would happen next. The sound of police sirens pierced the tense atmosphere as backup arrived, the flashing lights casting shadows across the park. Officers stepped out, instantly recognizing the father, their chief, standing tall in the center of the chaos. They moved swiftly, securing the scene as the father nodded toward the man. "Take him in," he said calmly, his voice steady but heavy with authority. The crowd erupted in murmurs, some cheering as officers cuffed the man, who protested weakly, his excuses falling on deaf ears. As he was led to the police car, a woman approached hesitantly, holding the hand of a young boy. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "He threatened my son last week. I was too scared to report it." Her words sent a ripple through the crowd, and suddenly, other voices chimed in, sharing similar stories. It became clear that this man had been a menace for far too long. Just when it seemed the moment had reached its resolution, one of the officers checking the man's belongings found a collection of notes and photos in his bag, evidence linking him to multiple parks across the city. The father's expression hardened as he realized this wasn't just a random act of cruelty, it was part of a pattern. He turned to the officers. "We're going to ensure every victim gets justice." As the car drove away, the father knelt beside his daughter, holding her close. "You're safe now," he whispered. The crowd began to disperse, but the weight of what had happened lingered. The father's determination to protect not only his own family, but others became the turning point in the story, a reminder of the power of standing up for what's right, even in the face of darkness. As the police car disappeared down the road, the park slowly returned to calm, though the weight of what had unfolded lingered in everyone's hearts. The father, still kneeling beside his daughter, spoke softly to her, reassuring her that she was brave and had done nothing wrong. Her small hand clutched his tightly, her tears beginning to fade as she found comfort in his presence. Witnesses who had shared their stories approached him, expressing gratitude for how he handled the situation. The woman who had spoken up about her son thanked him through tears, her relief clear. The father promised her and the others that justice would be served, and he meant every word. As they left the park together, his daughter looked up at him and asked, "Will he ever hurt anyone again?" The father smiled gently, holding her close. "Not on my watch." Peace had returned, but the courage and strength shown that day left an unforgettable mark on everyone who witnessed it.